The Outlaws were formed, they were originally called the Stormers, and Mike Berry wanted a backing group to record at Joe Meek's studio in 1961, and we auditioned, passed the audition, and Joe Meek changed the name to the Outlaws. It was me on the bass, Kenny Lundgren on guitar, rhythm guitar, Ritchie Blackmore on lead guitar, and Mickey Underwood on drums. Yeah, we saw an advert in the Melody Maker that Gene Vincent was looking for a backing group, and our guitar player Kenny Lundgren rang up Don Arden, and Don Arden came down to audition us at a rehearsal room somewhere. We played about 5 or 6 numbers, and he went, "Okay, boys, you got the job." So we were well pleased, and it was on that tour. But when we got close to the tour, Don Arden said, well, he said, I have got another band that can back Gene Vincent. We went, oh, what? He said, Jerry Lee needs a backing group. So I went, great, lovely. And it was perfect because we backed Jerry Lee on that tour. And then when Jerry Lee went home, we went on the road with Gene. So it all worked out perfect.
So you get the best of both worlds.
But of course, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I look back on that year, 1963, as one of the greatest years of my life, backing Jerry Lee and then on the road with Gene Vincent. And that got me playing the piano as well, was backing Jerry Lee, of course. So that was a great year, yeah. We rehearsed before we did the Saturday Club, funny enough, round at his house. It was in Mews somewhere in the West End. But just, I remember him saying, we're going to have a cocktail party. I'd only heard that on the films. I didn't know. I said, what's that then? You don't know what a cocktail party is? He said, well, you drinks. I went, all right then, I'll have some of that. And so we had a cocktail party, and we had a rehearsal at the same time. Yeah, he knew what he'd liked, and he was good at organising things. I mean, we used to do Baby Blue. Well, I got name is Baby Blue. Whoa, baby, baby, baby. And when we used to, and I think it was his suggestion, and we were really agile in those days, on the solo, we'd all like leap onto the top of our amps, and the guitar player would go on the floor, and you know, things like that. Yeah, that's good. And Gene would get on the floor, and then we'd be all back up. So it was quite choreographed in its way as well.
Did Joe Meek and Gene Vincent work together at all?
Yes, they did, and I don't know who the backing group was. I found this out after, and I was a bit annoyed that Joe didn't book me as the bass player. It came out on a film that the Outlaws were in, called Live It Up, which was like a pretty, it wasn't a B movie, it was a C or D or E movie, I would call it, with Hines starring in it. But Gene had sung one song in it called Temptation Baby, which was quite good. He recorded that at Joe's, I believe. Yeah, I wasn't present on the session, unfortunately. Gene really had something special. I mean, I realised that when I went on tour with him. And not every time would he do it, every night. Sometimes he'd be in a bad mood, and that was terrible. He would just wimp his way through the show. And I remember used to bollock him and say, Gene, come on, you know, and oh, I don't feel like it. But if he got somebody, for instance, if someone was out there that come to see him special like that, like Johnny Kidd used to come to see him now and again. And if Johnny Kidd was out there, you knew he was going to put on a fantastic show. And I mean, he had a great voice. He was the coolest looking rock and roller. I mean, Elvis was pretty, but Gene was pretty cool. He was cooler than Elvis in his way. Gene had that mean sort of rock and roll look, and he had everything else going with it. He had the voice, and he had the movements on stage. I mean, that bit when I first saw it on stage when I was backing him, we used to get the mic down, and then the leg would go over. It was done. It was like there's a frame missing in that film. You know, he's doing this, and next minute the leg's gone over, and he's on the floor, sort of. It was fantastic. I mean, he just had it, Gene. He used to say things, but you just sort. I mean, he said when we were coming home from Hamburg, he said his wife. He thought his wife was having an affair. I don't know if she was or if she wasn't. He said, "I'm going to go home and shoot my wife." I was just say, all right, Gene, okay, do you want a drink? Do you hear what I'm saying, Chaz? I'm going to go home and I'm going to shoot Margie. All right, Gene, okay, yeah, do you want a coffee or something? Chaz, you're not listening. And anyway, we went home, and about 2 days later, there was headlines in one of the newspapers. He actually did pull a gun on her, Margie. But apparently the gun, I read the thing, the gun was not in working order, so he didn't really get, I think he just got a warning, I believe. And we had a rehearsal with him that afternoon in London, and I thought he was going to be in a real bad mood, after this thing in the newspaper. And it was at Dinley's rehearsal studio in the West End, where a lot of bands and acts used to rehearse. And we turned up, and there was Gene in the room, opened the door, and Gene looked around and had a great big smile on his face, said, "I told you, Chaz, didn't I tell you?" And he was really pleased with himself. He said, Chaz, he said, tomorrow, he said, I'm going to Geneva. And he said, they want me to use their band. He said, but I want you to come with me so you can show them what's what. And I know, great. So I remember me putting a note in my girlfriend's house with my wife now, saying, I was all pleased. I was knocked out. I'd staying around I was going to stay around his house, right, in the West End, because we were leaving at like 5 o'clock in the morning, something daft. And that night, we stayed up and he got all his guns and showing me, like, because I wasn't interested. Hey, Chad, see this gun? Well, yeah. He said, this is a Smith & Wesson or whatever it was. Oh, yeah, Gene, and getting all his Nazi armbands out, which he had collected and things like that. But I just saw it as nothing threatening. I just see it as, yeah, all right, Gene. Then he'd take me in, come and see my new baby. And his wife was in bed, about 2 o'clock in the morning. And here's my new baby. She'd say, Gene, will you please be quiet? You're waking the whole house up, Gene. And we spent the whole night, went to bed about 4 o'clock in the morning. And he woke me up about 5 o'clock. And I always remember, with a light hour, a beer. He says, here's a beer, Chaz. I said, no. I said, have a cup of tea or something. So anyway, about 5:30, Don Arden is shouting at the door. I don't know if you ever heard Don Arden's voice, the loudest voice you've ever heard. Gene, come on, run up. Gene's got up, and I'm standing there. I've got my case. Oh, I didn't have a suit, right? And Gene Vincent, he was shorter than me. He said, I got a suit for you, because he lent me one of his suits. And the trousers were like up here, but I sort of worked them down and sort of made them look a little bit smart. So I'm standing there in Gene Vincent's suit and my suitcase. Don Arden came in, and Gene's standing there, and Don Arden went, come on, Gene, we're late. And without even looking at me, he went, who's he? And Gene went, well, I thought, because it was a new band, a Chaz could come along. Don't need anybody else, we've got no ticket for anybody else, the band knows your stuff, come on, get in the... And he just got in the cab. And off they went to the airport, and I'm standing there in this mews in the middle of London, in Gene Vincent's suit and this case, and that was that. I don't know how I got home. I can't remember if I bollocked Gene about it or not. I don't know. What. I've probably still got his suit somewhere. Don Arden was Don Arden. Loud voice, completely seemed unfeeling whatsoever. Would just bark his orders out, and that was it. Didn't get to know him any more than that. Done his job. We got paid. We used to hear all these stories about Don Arden, but never happened to us. We was on a retainer of £30 a week each, and we were paid on the dot. So it was all right by us. It was a shame, I think. He lent, as we all know, he lent heavily on the old. On the booze. He was the first one I'd ever known. I mean, my family, big beer drinkers, but I would call them heavy drinkers, not alcoholics in general, the ones that are in my family. But Gene was the first proper alcoholic that I remember in Hamburg. he'd get up, he'd have a whiskey bottle, and he wouldn't eat. I said to him, "You haven't had anything yet?" I've never known anybody like that. He said, "No, Chair." I said, "Look, I'll go out and get you a hamburger if you want, or whatever, you know, a bowl of soup from next door." "No, no, that's okay." And he just lived barely on whiskey for the whole week. Of course, that's going to get you in the end, and it did. I was with a band with Albert Lee called Heads, Hands and Feet, and Tony Colton had written a song called "Warming Up the Band," and he'd nicked a line out of one of Gene's famous song, "Bebop-a-lula, bebop-a-lula tonight, oh mama, you're all right." And it just so happened that we were recording in the West End, and Gene was billed to play at the Marquee just round the corner. And I said to the producer, I said, "Doc, what if I go round and get Gene just to come in and sing that line?" I said, "I know he'd love to do it, and like it would be a bit of publicity." He said, "Gene Vincent actually sings his line on our new song." Great idea. And I went round there, and it said, there was a big notice up outside, "Owing to unforeseen circumstances, Gene Vincent has to be returned back to the USA. No show tonight, blah, blah, blah." And I found out, I don't know if it's true or not, but quite likely, that he was in trouble with wife maintenance, and they come after him, and he buggered off back to America, and I think he was dead. About a month later, I read that he died. So nearly got him on record, but I never see him anymore. And it's a terrible shame that Gene's not with us today, because he would still be rocking and pulling in the crowds, even more so now. I mean, there was a sort of rock and roll slump in the mid '60s, which wasn't for me. But when the Beatles come out and the soul thing come out, which I like, you know, I like the soul thing, but a lot of rock and rollers were not earning a lot of money, but they soldiered through, and the likes of Jerry Lee today, he's not the Jerry Lee he used to be, but he's pulling the crowds, and Gene Vincent would have been, but we got his records to put on and rock along to. There's me singing there with Gene.